I've consulted with a lot of people and helped them make the transition to tech sales, whether it's out of school or from a different career altogether. And I'm often asked, what is the best path via, should I join a startup? Should I join a big company, etc.? So like anything, there's no one answer, but depending on where you're at in your career, I want to break down the best way that you can break into sales and the ideal path from both a company and compensation career trajectory standpoint. Now, I might quickly start from the perspective of my own career. While I really enjoy the startup world and I don't see myself working at a large corporation anytime soon, I will say I did work at a large tech corporation right out of college, and while I wasn't directly in sales, I was in an engineering support type of function. They had very renowned training, and it was, to their credit, very beneficial to my career. I got a chance to work with very high priority clients after I had been there for a little bit of time, and even just the way that you interact in a B2B professional setting, while it wasn't all boring and yes sir, thank you, all this stuff, you learn a lot of the day-to-day tactics and tackling that in a startup setting, you might have to learn on your own. So all that to say, I would say, especially if you're right out of school, maybe you're younger in your career and you're looking at transitioning to sales. Again, there's no right answer. My first sales job was at a small tech company, but at the same time, if you have the opportunity to work at a renowned company with renowned training, that might be a valid option for you for a few different reasons. Yes, they'll have the best-in-class training, and while there's debates on how relevant it is, etc., at least going there, having a standard training, you will at least be given a very solid framework. Again, it doesn't mean it's the best, it doesn't mean it's the most up to date, but you're going to be given a very solid foundation that you can then build upon, whether you agree or disagree with all the things that they taught you, etc. Whereas if you go to a very young startup, if you go to a smaller startup that doesn't have necessarily as much rigid structure, I have been in startup situations where I got incredible coaching, don't get me wrong. I've actually been very fortunate in that regard. But there's been some scenarios I've seen at friends at other companies, etc., that really just kind of had to sink or swim and had no formal training. So again, it's not that these big companies have the best in the world or their training is great and relevant, but if you have no sales experience and you're breaking in for the first time, going to those can give you a foundation to build upon. Again, having that foundation in place, having gone through a standard sales motion, you can then adapt it over time, modify it to fit your personality, fit the technology you're selling at startups, etc. So I would say 8 to 9 times out of 10, if you're young in your career, if you're right out of college, or if you're going into sales for the first time, if you can land a job at a place where you find the technology interesting and it happens to be like an Oracle, like a Salesforce, MongoDB, there's tons of companies that have very renowned training programs, that can be a great place to start because you have that foundation. Now, as you go throughout your career, a few different things happen. While no one will probably say this directly to your face, at these large corporations, there's definitely room for advancement. But that being said, again, while it's never said this cut and dry, management is really looking to identify the top 10 to 15, maybe 20% of people that come in at any given time. So when you're joining these large corporate programs, they bring you all in, they train you up. They're quickly trying to identify who the best of the best are from that bunch, as they usually bring in a bunch of people at a time. And those people are generally set to fast track and rise up in the organization. Now, it's not to say that if you're in the bottom 80% of that things can't happen, or once you hit your stride, you'll progress much faster. But it's more rare in those types of large corporate settings for you to very quickly progress your career unless you're identified right out of the gate as a very high potential person. That's kind of the trade-off there, where you've got this great foundation. If you do come in and you're fortunate enough to do really, really well, your career is going to skyrocket right out of the gate. But at a minimum, maybe you get there, maybe you're spinning your wheels, you're not crazy about the tech, you're just not crazy about working in a large corporate environment. You now have a great badge on your resume that looks very appealing to people across the industry. So changing jobs, trying to find a better environment or a better place that's suited for you is generally easier to do if you have that badge on the resume, like an Oracle, like a Salesforce, like any of the cloud providers, GCP, AWS, all this stuff, etc. And again, just beating a dead horse, if you're young in your career and you have a chance to work at those organizations, great. The flip side is, if you're not having any luck breaking into those, maybe you have a less conventional background, because honestly, many of those, especially the higher technically you go, actually want a STEM degree or past tech experience before they'd consider you as a candidate. I think going the startup route is a very valid option, but I would very strongly encourage you to vet out the management, ask about training throughout your interviews, and make sure there's a solid foundation in place before you make that jump to a smaller startup right out of the gate. The beauty is, if you do go there, you do very well, the opportunity for your career to really take off happens much quicker. So in my own career, I did very well right out of the gate at the startup I was at. I got promoted out of SDR in 3.5 months. I got another promotion within a year, and I had gone up basically 3 levels within less than 2 years, and actually was able to get recruited for a full enterprise role, something that takes maybe anywhere from 4 to 8 years of experience to get to in a very quick manner of time. That I don't think would have happened if I went to a super large corporation. Yes, I do think I would have done well there, but there's a lot more red tape, there's a lot more bureaucracy, there's a lot more politics in place. Whereas if you're at a startup and you're crushing it and you're bringing in revenue to this fast growing company, like, they want to get you in bigger and bigger situations, usually as quickly as possible. Now, the flip side, and the one thing, the caveat I'd say to all of this is, obviously, as I've mentioned, there's no one answer. But if you do come up in those training situations where you're at a large company, you're getting the best of the best training, and credit to them, I mean, there's some very good training there. But what I have seen working in startups is if you bring people in from these big companies, there are situations where they don't realize the advantage of having such a brand name. So for instance, if you're going from a huge Oracle and you're coming over to another company, if you don't have the brand name of Oracle, the reach of Oracle, people who will take phone calls from Oracle because it's a large company, same thing with Salesforce, Amazon Web Services, you name it. When you go from that environment to a startup, startups will usually offer you like more cash or a bigger title right out of the gate. But there's usually a chance where if you're not aware of the benefit of working at those big brands, you go to these small startups and you actually don't really perform well. You don't really know what you're doing in terms of trying to win new business, trying to bring a newer brand to a broader market. It's a much different skill set that's required. So I do see a lot of people that want to start with those big companies and then they're like, yeah, I want to go to a unicorn and ride the wave up. I would just say, again, I've seen a lot of people make the transition successfully, but don't be naive and think that the training from Salesforce is going to teach you how to sell with a company that's doing like 20 million a year and trying to break into Fortune 500 companies. It's a totally different dynamic. Again, to summarize, if you have the opportunity to work at a large company with renowned training and you're early in your career, 80+% of the time, that's probably the best move for you. Now, that being said, if you do like more risk, if you do find a smaller company that has great training or a manager that aligns with your background, or you can tell is very good at what they do, there's nothing wrong with that. And I would encourage you to try it if you think you're going to like that more. But hopefully that gives you perspective as you're looking into the different tech sales landscapes and what job might be best. Appreciate everyone's time, and we'll see you next week. Thanks.